sons Nathan Macario, Noah Manuel, lovely parents that I had that raised me, Jose Macario and Maria Irene. Very excited to have you here. We are missing one of our favorite hosts, Tim, who's the OG. He started us all for us. I know he's on about making change in the world. We miss you, Tim. You're with us right now, and we can't wait to have you back. And let's go ahead and introduce ourselves, Michael.
Michael Scott, son of Vassie and Rashida Scott, father of Addison and Grayson, husband of Megan.
Right, John.
Yeah, John Monteleone. I always like to say, proud son of two angels and proud father of two saints, and raised by Joseph and Lynette Monteleone, and father of Antonia and Rochelle Monteleone.
Very nice. So what we're going to do today, everyone, is once again, thank you to National Parents Union, Dad to Dad Talk. I think we're going on 10 or 11 weeks on this run, really trying to tell our story as fathers, myself having a 7th grader and 4th grader, Michael having some little ones, and John already had raised some children. What we would like to do is we want to continue the conversation from last Thursday, where we started our show with a moment of silence for George Floyd and really all the victims of brutality in the United States of America. And I would say that we want to continue the conversation today, but we want to try to give dads some tips about how to have a conversation. For those that want to be allies, for those that are of color or in an oppressed group that want to know how to have a conversation. Because I'll tell you what, it's one thing when you're single. It's one thing when you're in college. It's another thing when you have a little face with those beautiful eyes looking at you, asking you these questions you never thought you'd be asked. And either while you're playing a video game, it comes up, we'll get to that, Michael, to, just a random word being spewed by your child that you never expected. What's your reaction? So we hope to give you some tips. We don't have all the answers. All we have are just a conversation piece of what's worked for us, what hasn't worked for us. And, we don't speak for our cultures. We don't speak, we're one person. We all from different parts of the country. Everyone has a different story. But as dads, we're really excited to really be able to share with you some ideas, some things that may work related to how you engage with this current pandemic of race in America. And oh yeah, by the way, we're also having a pandemic of the coronavirus that we're all trying to worry about. So let's start with John. John, you've raised children. You're the OG in the room here. You've been through it. So tell us, have you had what tip could you give a father, and what have you, that maybe you've experienced related to gender, race, culture, other ethnicities? What could you share?
Yeah, I think as a father, and I raised this up last episode, I really didn't do a good job talking about race and social justice issues as much with my daughter and daughters, just because I tried to just model how I lived and my interactions and, those that I advocated for through my profession as an educator. And I think there were times, though, we're a family that we always watch, we try to keep an eye on current events. So we always watch the news, we always have news channels, or we talk about, the latest events that are happening in sports. I'm a big sports guy. So I think in those areas, that's probably where, as a father, I would lean in, is if we were watching something on the news and something came up. Or on sports. Like most recently, my youngest daughter, Antonia, she had no choice to be a big 49ers fan because I'm a huge 49ers fan. So I remember the whole issue with Colin Kaepernick, taking a knee during the national anthem. And so, we talked about that. And, she said something to me during that time that, from a 15-year-old's perspective, still resonates with me to today. And, so I asked her about that. I said, do you think that's disrespectful, to the flag? That was the narrative to the country. And she says, I really didn't look at it that way. She says, I didn't, narrow it down to just our country, the USA, or the flag. She goes, I just think, like, if you feel that, you know, if you're part of an organization and when you stand up to honor something, to show that you're proud of what's going on, then that's a show of pride. But if you don't stand, you know, someone has to earn your respect. And she said to me, she said, for whatever reason, you know, what we're doing in America hasn't earned his respect, and so he wants to take a knee. So I mean, from a father's perspective, if I had to give a tip, I think I would, one, tell fathers not to follow my suit and be a little bit more intentional about having those conversations. But using things like books or current events to segue into those discussions.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think you're absolutely right. You know, just being exposed to different things. I'll tell you, I know some current white Americans who now have children, and these white Americans, this group of folks that I know are conservative, but now have children that are very liberal, very young, you know, in the movement, if you will, and they're struggling with it, trying to figure out how to have that conversation at home because they love them to death. And then speaking to some of them, they're like, hey, that's my daughter. I'm going to support her wherever she needs. I go, well, that's got to be tough because now you're having to sort of pick sides in some way, but because they love them so much, they're not picking sides necessarily. They're just hearing their perspective. So I'm thinking, wow, you know, that's interesting. And I almost wonder if they could have done that with that same love to those that they don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
So
And I think that's important. I agree with what you're saying. So, and that's one thing that we never did with our daughters. It's like when they came home and wanted to talk about something, even if, you know, my ex-wife, if we didn't agree with the, you know, their philosophy or the way they approached it, we never diminished their thinking around it, and we would just talk through it. So I think you're definitely onto something there. I think parents should do that and encourage that.
All right, fellow Bubble of Love member, Mr. Scott.
Sir, sir.
I mean, I think we're onto something here, but what advice would you give dads right now who are talking about race in America?
Yes, I think my thoughts around this are going to be very general, because I think whether we're talking about race, whether we're talking about religion, whether we're talking about sexuality, whether we're talking about employment and finances, I think it starts by being present. You know, being present and being in the moment. So when I say be present and being in the moment, we all are grinding and we've got 101 things that we're doing. But when we are with our children, being there and being present so that they can ask us questions, or that they can see us experiencing the world around us, and being true to those authentic feelings that we've talked about throughout these segments. You know, like, when you feel like you need to cry about something, go ahead and cry. Be present in that. When you are angry and want to punch something, then punch the pillow. Let them see it, and ask you questions on why you're feeling that way. I think the worst thing that we could do is hide from the reality of our world, and then not be present, so that our children can ask us those questions, or see our raw human emotions, because they're going to learn from us. So I'd rather my children learn how to cry, how to be angry, how to inquire about the world. Like, I want them to see that, and I want to be the person that models that for them. So, and then they can help me grow, as I think we kind of landed on too. Like, they're going to help me grow as a person throughout the years. They already have in their 3 and 2 years, by just watching them. So presence is my advice.
Yeah, so you're saying a lot there, though. So I heard from John, you know, be able to expose your children more, whether it's books or other items or something that really keeps that conversation going. Then I heard from you modeling, but within modeling, you know, showing those emotions, and then which leads to a conversation, and then they learn from you. So that's heavy right there, and I hope I can remember all those at the end of the show, so you all can help me there. But we're already at the 5 tips, right? And I think that's very interesting to do that. I'll say this, you know, I said thanks to our, frankly, this came from us, because of our traditions episode that we did a few weeks ago, we talked about traditions. Thank you, John, for that topic and pushing us further on it. I started teaching my son Spanish. We're on week 2.
Oh, yeah.
Where I'm only doing Spanish with him. That's it. And I have this design of lessons that are like 4 hours a day, mixed in with video, mixed in with some audio, reading, visuals, flashcards. And I had given them a link to get on every day. And it was a particular product online to learn Spanish. And every day I check in with them. I'd have that English portion of the day at the end of the day to recap. How's the agenda? Is the agenda too tough? Is it easy? How's that link to that one product? Oh, it's great, it's great, it's great. But I knew in that first week, Thursday or Friday, when I'd speak Spanish, they keep looking at me like, you know, French, German, like they had no clue what I was saying. I said, okay, they're not on that product because they should be a little more advanced at this point. And it's only day 4 or 5. So on Saturday, I said, get your computers out. Let's look at those analytics and see what the user rate is. And all of a sudden, it's like Moses part of the sea, man. Oh, the truth started to come out. And it had a reality check. All of a sudden, it started, oh, we lied. We never were on it. Boy, the stuff you see behind me, that art came from anger.
Oh, man.
Came from hurt. I was devastated, gentlemen. I sat on this table Saturday night, just devastated, man. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to quit. I'm getting up at 3 in the morning to do this. I'm staying up till 8 or 9 at night trying to do these agendas. I got a Google Classroom built for them. And I just started to draw and write. And I'm not a drawer, man. I'm not an artist. I just did it. I just kind of did my thing. And after talking to my wife, calming me down, it was more hurt, though, than was anger, to be honest with you, right? And we're all seasoned educators. We've been around kids. We know when they're lying. It's kind of obvious. And so I met with them, and I talked to them the next day. And my oldest son, talk about emotions, he didn't know how to apologize. And I taught him how to apologize. And then I got up out of this chair, turned to him, and he was sweating. It was hot. He was embarrassed. He was feeling bad. And I hugged him. And I whispered in his ear, I loved him. And his arms were stiff. And I held him. And then his arms raised. And then he hugged me back. And so it was a powerful moment because I realized in my own anger, you know, hurt people, right? In my own anger, back in the day when I was raised, boy, here comes the belt, bam, bam. Not that my father did that a lot, my mother did a lot, but I remember that being really, really young. That happened a couple times. And I didn't do that. My words were my belt. My emotions were that sandal coming across the room, right? And man, it was powerful. So back to modeling, Mike, and really back to you, John, and how just talking about it, you know, I could have just been angry and moved on. I could have shut that thing down and moved on with my life. And I said, look, if you go learn Spanish from your teacher in high school, what do I care? And I just held it and I reflected on it and I paused and I dug deep and even prayed about it. And it got me to that place. So I'll tell you, it was a moment. And then I switched from that product to a different product. And now they like it better. Cost me some money, but that's all right because I'm investing into them of what I believe I owe them in my culture and having them learn Spanish and the culture as well. So I appreciate that.
So Jose, did you pose any, like how did you have the conversation with them about why they went down that road those first 4 days? Like, you know, what was the resistance for them? And then how do you take that feedback that they're giving you as a dad and reflect on that? And what tips would you have to other fathers about just that? So you have best intentions, you have best plans. It doesn't necessarily go how you want it to go. Instead of overreacting, though, you engaged. Can you talk to us a little bit about, you know, what questions, what did you find out, and what tips would you have for us when we get in those situations?
Well, so like I said, every day I'd ask them, give me feedback. I teacher would to a student, how's this working? Give me the goods and the positives, you know, and what wonderings you got. And then they lied to me, right? And on this one particular product. And so when I got really upset, I did use my partner. I did use my wife. I don't use that appropriate word. She was my teammate. So all of a sudden, I became the teacher and she was a principal. And so we went for a walk on the beach that next morning. And she said to me, which I appreciated so much, she goes, you know what? What do you need me to do? How can I help you? And I had to think about it because I didn't know. Because I was done. I was so hot and hurt. I was hurt more than anything else. Because I had already given a Google Classroom with my dad's picture on it. That was the why. And the essential question, I got essential questions, gentlemen. I'm breaking this down like it was a classroom. Is who's going to continue the Villarreal traditions after me? So I went deep on the why. I went deep on, we're not just going to get up and learn Spanish. There's some deep, in fact, the class that I've created is not even called Spanish class. It's something related to culturas, cultures, and traditions. Back to the conversations we had. I was inspired by you all. But I think that, you know, but having your partners in your life help you, you know, and if it's not, if you're not with someone, then it's someone else in your life that can help you through it, to give them the perspective. Why is your dad trying to do what he's trying to do? And back in the day, you call that Catholic guilt, at least in my upbringing, right? But it wasn't really that. It was more of an explanation. So yeah, they got some punishment out of it. They got their tablets taken away, computers taken away for a couple of days. They had to apologize eventually. But I would say the tips that I would give dads is allow yourself to be angry. Like, be angry, but give yourself a deadline. Say, all right, that's what I did. I said, all right, I'm going to be mad tonight. I'm going to reset tomorrow. And I got quiet. Got quiet, man. I just drew and drew and drew.
Jose, do you think that the nurturing approach is what allowed for you to get that valuable feedback about the product, about the medium?
Yeah, I would say it was. I mean, well, I would say that allowing myself to be angry is what it kicked it all off. Because if I had carried that anger the next day, then my vision would have been very cloudy. I'd had shades on when talking to him. But instead, I cut it off. I woke up and I said, okay, brand new day. I'm still hurt, but I'm not angry. And then back to the nurturing, I lean into my heart, lean into the essential question in my head, and said, all right, then what's the strategy now? All right, I'm not gonna let up on these two. And then the next day, Monday, I said, all right, gentlemen, give me feedback. That Monday evening, did you actually get on the system? Oh, yeah, we did. I said, all right, well, good. So I want to see that. Now we're going into Thursday today, and I'm looking for those signals that they are learning from that product, along with everything else I'm giving them. And I think it's working now. But back to your question, I think it's giving myself that deadline to get that anger out of the way and allowing myself to be angry, and then pivoting to my heart and going, all right, let's just work through this a little bit. But for those that are not patient, for those that have your own trauma, I always say, man, our trauma, and I want to talk about this next, Michael, with you, is we all have scars. We have scars in our brain, our hearts, and our skin. But from trauma, right? Whether it's income, race, culture, community, you know, whatever it is, we have those scars. You were telling a story before the show, and I want you to bring it up today. But I want you to add to it, were there any scars that came up for you when your daughter asked you what she asked you while you were playing a video game?
Yeah.
You think about that?
Yeah. So my daughter, who, like, one of those just little sessions that I had some time between the next meeting or something like that. So she was on her tablet getting her tech time in. So I got my tech time in for a second, and she's listening to watching PJ Masks or something, and she leans over and she's looking at me, and she's got this smile on her face, and she's like, "Dad, you're brown." And I pressed pause. Again, I was like, what did you say? So I need a little clarity. She said, "Dad, you're brown." And I'm like, all right, let's go with this. So what are you, honey? And I preface this, I am Black and my wife is white. And I was just curious on what she was going to say. And she said, "Well, I'm brown with a brown yellow." she's lighter skinned child, and I was like, okay, that's interesting. So then I was like, well, let me just keep probing. So what's mom? And she said, well, and she, she looked up, and I was like, all right, so she's processing. I can see her brain processing, and she said, yeah, she's brown with not as much yellow, is what she said, not that much yellow. And I was like, all right. So my dad, who hopefully we'll get to meet in a few episodes down the road, is light skinned as well. And I said, well, what's Poppy? And she looked at herself, she looked at me, and she said, well, he's brown yellow. And I just left it there. I was just like, oh, okay. And I shared that with my wife, and my wife didn't think much of it aside from the fact, like, and it's not like as though we say to her, okay, going over to your white grandparents, or you're going over to your black grandparents, or the child down the street is. We haven't done that. We haven't had those type of conversations. So where this came from, I don't know. So going back to my point about being present, like now I'm thinking like, all right, did she see something on TV? You guys posed a question because you saw, I paint with my daughter from time to time, right? Was it just, the color scheme? Because she has all the colors, because she doesn't just have the red, orange, blue. She's got all the paint colors. So I don't know, but the fact that she put context to my skin and that color lets me know it. I mean, I'm not naive enough to say that we wouldn't have a conversation at some point, but I wasn't ready for it at 3. I wasn't ready for it, and I still don't know exactly where to take that conversation, to be honest. So now coming back to did it hit me with anything that I've experienced in my life? So coming back full circle there. No, this is a unique piece. From what I've had experiences. I felt as though in different forms, like in college, like I had to choose which part of the cafeteria I was going to sit next to, and I honestly looked at the color of people's skin and the ethnicities that I perceived behind that. But I think it's a different thing when your daughter, like it was a different thing when Addison said that to me, and in light of what's going on in the world now too, and I'm just like. And we've been real intentional. Like she hasn't seen nor Grayson the news. Even though I watch the news, like they're not paying attention right now. They are just loving life as it is. But it didn't spark anything in me aside from the fact that I am going to have to share my experiences with her around race in a way that, and my son, so there's this dad piece too that says, all right, now with my son. Even a difference in the type of conversations, bringing in that masculinity piece. But I that's what is traumatic for me is like, I'm going to have to share some of my experiences with them in a way that is informative, but hopefully doesn't cloud them on the goodness and humanity at the same time, right? Like that to me, I want to keep this, what they have right now, because it's what God intended, and I'm gonna go there. In my heart, my face, that's what God intended, the goodness that they have. So yeah, that was traumatic because now it got me thinking, and but not through personal experience. It's just the idea that I won't be able to protect her much longer from the world as it is.
So Mike, I have a question for you, and we're talking about giving tips to dads. So my question is, are you going to re-engage Addison on why she asked you that? And if so, like, how are you going to do that? And if not, if you don't think it's appropriate, tell us why.
So, I think I'll have to be real intentional and be kind of to Jose's point, be lockstep with my wife on this, because messaging has to be, well, in my opinion, has to be lockstep here, and we both bring different experiences. But how do we go about this conversation will be important. As I shared, like we have books galore of characters that look all different shades with all different hair textures, and my goal is that she sees herself in positive lights throughout literature, throughout the dolls that she collects and plays with throughout her aspirations, and what, like we just read the Little Women's Trailblazer book, and it does have, you know, the gamut of race and how you can be empowering. So yes, we'll engage, but I think it might be more so through a, you know, do you see yourself in these people? To me, and now we're getting into the character and the content of a person, but we're not hiding from the fact that from an optic standpoint, we do have different colors to us. But, you know, I want her to learn that traditions aren't necessarily rooted in the color of your skin, but maybe in your background and where you're from and those things. So we're just going to try to navigate that together. But I'm going to listen and learn to you all. That's why I love these talks too, to help me, because there's no playbook. We just have to do something that's authentic and right for our house, and to make sure that she's equipped when she leaves our home to keep with her the morals and the values that we have instilled in her here to adapt to any situation that she encounters.
You know, John, you've shared before that
And
you grew up.
Grace the two.
Yeah. You appreciate that, Mike. You said something about that made me think about John. John, you said you grew up with Latinos. Is that right? In a Latino community, right?
Predominantly, yeah. I grew up in a predominantly Hispanic part of town. Yeah.
Yeah.
So a lot of my good friends and
yeah.
the godfather of my children.
Yeah.
Latino and Hispanic. Yes.
So John, with that note, you know, I'm thinking about this notion of, I've heard a lot, Michael, as well, this idea of an ally. I've heard that a lot recently, but I actually heard that a lot through the, you know, LGBTQIA community before, of being an ally, which is somebody who's friendly and supportive and also sort of a warrior for a particular group of society. And I don't know why this came to me, John, but I've always felt that you were kind of an ally of the heart. You know, I've always felt that in you. Anything you have said, and the reason I know this is I've reheard all of the episodes for the book we're working on, everybody. Hopefully something comes out of it. But I kept hearing that, you know, I kept hearing love from Michael, heart from you, John. And I know I mentioned to Michael about this idea of scars that we have, but, you know, have you ever considered yourself to be an ally?
So I consider myself to be an advocate. And I'll tell you where that comes from, Jose. Growing up poor, there was a lot that we didn't have. And fortunately for us, we grew up in a time, in a neighborhood where everybody looked out for everybody. So I remember times where neighbors would put food on our step. I remember a really good friend of mine, I'm gonna give him a plug, the Fitzpatricks, who would give me clothes before the school year would start, so that I had fresh clothes, or at least new, fresh to me. And so as part of the reason I went into education was truly just to be that ally, that advocate, because that's what I had growing up. And I am who I am today because of the people that were around me. So because of who they were, that's the reason. And I want to do that. I want to pay it forward. And so, you know, one of the organizations I want to give them a plug because they're near and dear to my heart is I'm an alumni and current member of the National Institute for Latino School Leaders. And I love being a part of that organization because we're doing more than just advocating. We're actually helping and working on shaping policy that has systematically over time placed barriers in the way for Black and brown children, people of poverty. And so, yeah, I do consider myself an ally. I do consider myself an advocate. And I hold that near and dear to my heart because, like I said, I wouldn't be where I am today. My children wouldn't have what they have today if it weren't for people advocating and being an ally for me. So yeah.
Michael, you know John more than I do. What would you say if you were to say to a new dad, seek an ally? You know, somebody that can be in your circle. How would you describe John to maybe look for that profile of that ally advocate?
That is a big
Yeah.
question there.
Come on, let's go, gentlemen. Let's go.
Yeah,
Come on,
let's get real.
let's go.
So honestly, like I've talked several times. I'm 3-year-old, 2-year-old. And John has been a part of helping me kind of navigate some things here. So I would say, so if I had to put a profile around it, I would say someone that you could just, from an ally standpoint, if that's the case that we're kind of framing, is me an ally is willing to not only stand beside you, but be in front. And kind of letting you know what's coming and being there to be a buffer and a support. So he's done that. I've been able to ask questions about this thing called father. We even had to talk about, I linked up to him, I think it was last week, to kind of say like, hey man, I've learned a lot by just seeing the end line with your kids, and you've done a great job. So I know I can go forth and ask questions. So to me, you kind of framed it earlier, and I'm gonna steal it, the OG. So if I had to put a profile on it, he's the OD. The original dad has kind of gone through it and has those experiences, but also is honest enough to kind of say, yeah, this is where I've come short from a perception, from his own self-reflection standpoint, which may not be the perception that others have. So to me, there's also that piece that says, all right, so I may have messed up here, or I thought I might have, but when it was time for my family to step out, this was the image. This is what we were able to portray, and this is what my children were able to do in spite of me. So I don't know if that gets to the root of your question, but if I'm a new dad and I'm looking for someone to talk to, that's the type of person I want to be able to talk to. Someone that can keep it real with me and say, yeah, this is where I fumbled. This is what I would do differently, and consider this when you encounter these type of situations. And I think John reflects that. I know he does.
Very nice. I appreciate that, gentlemen. I would say also, this is my own opinions, my other piece of advice that I would add to dads. Let's say that you're an ally for a particular group of people, right? Whether it's of color, ethnicity, culture, religion, gender. I would say not to do this. Don't approach them, whatever that group is, and say, do all people in your group do this? Don't do that. Don't do that. Because as an educator, I've been told that, are all Mexicans? And when I hear that as a sentence starter, do all Mexicans? I'm like, let me coach you up. Let me help you out. And I don't do it to demean them or shame them. I let them finish their sentence. And I would say, I wouldn't approach it that way. I would rather you say, I'm noticing a pattern and I'm curious about. Kind of help me understand further. So I would say if you're looking for those allies, I completely agree with you, John. An ally. It definitely is not someone who's going to stand beside you, but is be in front of you. I completely agree with that. And I think that that's what you can do best to try to bring that diverse thinking in your life with your children. So one, John says, expose them, get those books, but also build that community around them. Have them partake really around different groups of people, different types of living from folks. I think that would be really important. And I do agree, with Michael, with his tips of making sure you model, really model about how do you get to that heart, how to get to those emotions, where do they come from? And also that also allows you to teach them. And then certainly with these allies, the idea that you want to make sure you find that profile, of someone who's going to show you their heart, but also tell you, look, this is where I've come short. Similar to the way Michael described John. I do have another question though for you. If you were going to give another piece of advice for fathers who And I'll ask you, John, if that's okay. I know we were going to talk about today divorce and separation, but what advice would you give to a father who may not be with the mother of their child, whether it's a relationship or it's a union of marriage, and then they're off now in a sort of a blended family? You know, how do you engage with that other stepdad? You know, how might you sort of maneuver through that and make them an ally, if you will? What advice would you give there?
So that's a great question, and I'm gonna go back to what Mike was speaking about earlier about just being your authentic self and being present. And I think you have to be present enough in the moment, but you have to really be authentic. And one of the most important things that I've learned throughout my journey with my ex-wife, it took me some steps to get there. I have always loved that woman and love and adore her till today. And I think the steps that I struggled to get there to with my girls was to show that authentic love for her to them. And so if I have any advice to a father that is not with the mother of their children, one of the most important things that you have to do is make sure that you not only show them, but talk to them about the love that you have for their mother, and be really genuine about it. So that's one of the things that I've always come to rely upon. And it's funny that you bring that up, because my ex-wife and I were talking about 2 weeks ago, and she was explaining to me about a couple that she knows where the mom and dad don't necessarily get together, and just how difficult that experience is for the kids. And so she just called me up out of the blue, and she shared with me, she says, you know, I'm only calling for one reason, and that's just to say thank you. Like, thank you for always being, you know, present. Thank you for always, you know, looking at the big picture, not being argumentative. She was like, I love the relationship that we're able to have. She says, because, you know, we've had joint birthday dinners, we've had joint graduations, we've had joint holidays. And I can see that relieves a lot of pressure off of our girls for not having to like hold 2 separate graduation parties, hold 2 separate birthday dinners. So, I mean, it's really important. It's working for us, and it's something. And you know, even her current husband, you know, like we've gone out and had dinner together. We enjoy each other's company. You know, I call and ask him advice on certain topics, and I don't do it to show that to my daughters, but they see it through, like Mike said, through modeling. So that would be the advice that I would give to other fathers.
Well, I would say this, man. Wow. You got to teach us how to do that, because I tell you, I don't know how many dads would be able to do that. I mean, it's such an emotional, I can imagine the next episode we can talk about that, just the idea of separating and then having that joint kind of relationship. I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, and Jose, once again, I really can't take a lot of credit. Like, I'm going to give the credit again to my mom, because you said through like listening to our transcripts how the heart from me jumps out. That's really my mom. Like, that's Lynette Monteleone. Like, she has taught me to, you know, focus on the big things and lead with your heart. And so, and that's just what I always do. And I think that's helped in the relationship, with the separation, and even with the relationship that I currently have now with my ex-wife's current husband.
Wow, she did a heck of a job, man. I'll tell you that. So I appreciate you sharing that. Michael, let's flip it. You know, how about that dad who's in that relationship less than 5 years and, you know, struggling to get there, man, struggling to get to that 6th year, struggling to get to that 7th year. And we know we talked about allies, we talked about that, but we're really talking about heart. We're really talking about patience, really talking about perspective. But what could you give? What's that advice you can give to that young dad in that young relationship when they're just struggling to get to the next month together?
So that's an interesting thing because I don't have that experience because I'm not a young dad. However,
You've been through it, right? You've been through it.
I've been through it, and my wife and I have been together for, let me get this right, 19 years, married 3. Um, so I guess my advice would be, take your time, even if you are, a dad and you're in a relationship, and it's, if we're talking about not having that marriage and it's just a partnership, take your time, because that partner, even though you've committed to having a child or children together, the longevity of it, you've got to get it right, right? This is a partnership, as John indicated, for that doesn't just there is no expiration date, right? When you're talking about what you're building with your children. So to me, it is to be patient with it. But I guess my advice doesn't change much from with the children, like being present. That is the thing. Even 19 years in, I'm still getting reminded that I am not often present enough, and that's difficult, man. And I'm entering into something now professionally where I am going back to my hometown district. Kind of guess just announcing this now. There's an opportunity, but the fear is that I may not be as present. So I've got to still continue to work on that, right? So I'm not sure if I'm getting to the crux of things, but so I'll just take a broader look at if you're trying to have a solid relationship, you have to invest into that relationship, because there's going to be times where, due to mistakes that we make withdrawals. So kind of putting a financial analysis on this, right? You have to deposit double that to make sure that you're, we just got to make sure that we're continuously investing so that when those withdrawals do occur, we're still in the positive, and we can continue to grow. So I guess that would be my advice to that person that's in that early stages, but have committed to being a father and being in a relationship at the same time. You have to be present to both in order to build that relationship. But also, like I said earlier in earlier segments, choose wisely too. Fellas, I mean, there's you choose wisely, because now it's not just about you in that relationship with that woman. It's one thing, like I've had relationships before, but there was no children involved in that, right? So if I wanted to end the relationship, it was kind of easy to just kind of say, all right, not the right fit. However, when you have children, right, that's a game changer. So choose wisely, and then invest and be present. So,
well, as we come back around with all of you for the final thoughts of this show, once again, we miss you, Tim. We'll see you next time. You're here with us. I know you're busy. So, my last thoughts here as we wrap up, gentlemen, really are, it comes down for me about training people how to treat you. And whether you're thinking about racism, you're thinking about your marriage, your relationships, your kids, if you train them by silence, when your child curses at you, your spouse throws something at you in fun, and you allow that, then you're training them that's okay. And so I would say that it's important to always remember, you train people how to treat you. And I would just leave that as my final thoughts as we wrap up this discussion that we've started today and really last Thursday related to race in America, and really for us right now, tips that we can give our dads that I hope you picked up during this episode. Michael, final thoughts?
Keep praying. Keep faith. That's where I'm grounded in. That was my goal for the week, was to make sure I invested more in my prayers, and do so jointly. And I still have work to do on that. But to me, God doesn't give us anything that we can't handle. So I'm going to continue to lean on my faith in spite of what's going on. in the world around me, knowing that there are lessons to learn from this, and advocacy to take charge of. So I'm going to do that with a servant leadership mindset. So thanks for the great moderation, Jose. Too, I just want to give you a shout out because this isn't an easy conversation to keep probing and keep digging in. And I just want to, acknowledge in a final thought, an appreciation for your courageous leadership in helping us navigate this conversation.
Thank you, Mike. That means a lot. Thank you. John, final thoughts?
Yeah, my final thought is a lesson that I learned yesterday from my daughter, Antonia. So she came over yesterday. Her and her mom were going through something, and she decided that she needed a break. And so she came to Dad's. And my final thought and what she taught me was communicate. And we went out to dinner last night, and I was just really impressed on how she was able to communicate to me what she was going through, what she was dealing with. And I have to admit, she, at her age, at 18 going on 19, she is definitely a better communicator than I was when I was 18, 19 years old. And I really admire that about her. And so that's my final thought. Like, you learn a lot through having a conversation about yourself and about others, and they learn from you as well. So communication is key.
Well, I appreciate you, men, so much for your efforts today and being vulnerable and being honest and transparent. Thanks again, National Parents Union. Thank you for those 9,000, about 15,000 fans of ours that view us. They really don't know who you are, but I know that most of you, if not all of you, are here with an open heart, ready to hear our perspective. Shout out to Natasha, who's going to be on our show next week. Breaking news, just so you know.
Breaking news.
Can't wait to hear that and see her, in those suits with that pose. You know what I mean? It's going to be fun. Thank you again, everyone, and have a safe week. We'll see you next Thursday.
Thank you, Jose. Miss you, Tim.
Awesome. You guys are offline. Thank you. That was a great show.
Hey, good job.
Awesome. You guys have a great weekend.
All right, you too. Thank you.
Get a show next week, Natasha.
Yeah, so I heard. Okay.
Breaking news.
Next week. Have a good one. Bye,
Right.
guys.
You too.
Did it.